right, thanks, Dylan. We're on. Hey, guys, welcome back to What's the Hazard? It is Friday, February 23rd. Another beautiful morning here in Omaha, Nebraska. It is Omaha, right? I mean, it's been 60 degrees and sunny every day.
I didn't even bring a jacket.
You're in a shirt sleeves. Exactly. It is incredible, and another beautiful morning. I hope you had a good week. I had a really good week, and I'm not gloating, but I know it goes up and down. So if you had a good week, good for you. If you had a difficult week, man, reach out to someone, make some connections. Don't suffer by yourself if you don't have to. So, and things will get better, at least in my experience. So you recognize my guest. He's been with me before, Ezra Schlecht. He is just a regular guy that works.
Just a regular guy. Yeah, that's it.
We would call you a loss control consultant, perhaps,
One would.
Away
sometimes.
from the podcast,
yeah.
but regular guy on the podcast.
That's right.
Marsh McLennan Agency.
Yep.
MMA. I love the acronym.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of MMA.
Yeah, everybody gets it confused, right?
I'm sure they do, man.
Asking
they
for my
look
email.
at you and see MMA and they think, guy's a fighter.
Yeah, no, he's not a fighter.
Not when you don't have to.
That's right.
Only when necessary. Well, thank you for coming back. It's
Absolutely.
good to see you.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Did you have a good week?
It was a good week.
Yeah,
I've kind of been.
What's your week like? What's a typical week for you like?
So they're all different, which is what I like,
Yeah.
right? It's nice to have a little bit of variety and be different. So Monday, I flew to, where did I fly to? Detroit. Hung out there, did a training, then spent the day in the airport, which the day in the airport feels like days in real life.
Yes.
And then I came back, and then the next morning I got up early and I bombed out to Antelope County, Nebraska. So about a 3-hour drive for me. Did some trainings and inspections there. Came back. Yesterday I was here in town.
Nice.
Met with Anthony. Grabbed a coffee with him.
Good. Our friend Anthony Blake.
That's right.
Your good friend and my new friend. So
yeah. And
fantastic.
then today, I came from an appointment and now I'm here.
Very good, man.
So it was a good week.
I love that. I love the fact that it's always changing. It's different. I've done the routine jobs before that I find those challenging sometimes for me, So one of the aspects of safety that I do love is that, every day is somewhat different.
Yeah.
This week I did a couple of site visits. Monday was a site visit at a regular client. Tuesday was a site visit. Wednesday and Thursday, Chris Bryant and I did a 30, day 3 and 4 of a 30-hour class.
Oh, that's great.
Which was wonderful. It was our friends down at Hawkins Construction. What a impressive group of guys. It was a bunch of young guys. They have some superintendents and leads and some laborers in the class. And we did a 30-hour construction. And I told them, I almost don't enjoy doing 30-hour constructions anymore because
It's a commitment.
It is a commitment for them and for you.
Both.
And you go in, and I have encountered resistance in the construction world before doing
To
the
safety?
training. Yes.
No
exactly,
way.
brother. Exactly. That's it. And I'm too old to fight back at this point, it seems like. But this was a group of young, energetic, curious guys, and the class was excellent.
That's great.
And in large part, that's Chris Bryant because he's excellent.
Just seeps enthusiasm.
He just brings people in. He is like a shepherd, like a safety shepherd.
Yeah, you can't not enjoy his classes.
And Ted Martinez, the safety guy down there, is excellent, and he just conveys that sincerity. I think the guys also get that. So I had a great week this week. They're not always like that, but I'm grateful for having the good ones.
That's awesome. I do a fair amount of training, right? And I primarily do 10 hours, 30 hours of commitment.
I would
right?
much prefer a 10.
So the vast majority spent there for the authorized training. And I always like to preface, who's had the class before, right? Because there's the common misconception that your card expires, right? Government says, Abu Dhabi, I bless you, got a card.
Right.
Thou does not expire.
Right.
Should it? Well,
probably.
We can leave that up for discussion. But I think that, there's some employers that are requiring, hey, do you got a card? Okay, cool. Next question is it current within 5 years? Is kind of the rumor mill that I hear.
Yeah, I've seen a lot
and
of
I
that
think
too.
I think that's fair, right? Because the folks who are holding these cards, the 10s, the 30s, both, safety is not their primary, right? So It's the same reason first aid CPR expires every 2 years, right? So it's not, we're not doing it every day. We forget things. We get into our zone. They get into a flow state and they start building widgets and they forget things. So I think having that refresher
I completely agree.
is beneficial.
Yeah.
But where I was going with that is the classes are, I say, who's got the card? I get a couple hands. I say, well, hopefully this one's better than the last one, right? Because I think that the trainer, the content a little bit, because you got a little bit of autonomy there to create your own content. So I don't love the canned stuff.
No one does.
I think that, the trainer, and Chris does an excellent job, right? He's super energetic and motivated about it. So I think that, a 10 hour is not a 10 hour, right?
Totally.
So a trainer really drives that. I have a 10-hour card. Somebody told me I needed one once upon a time, not too long ago, right? And I said, I don't need a card to get on the site. I give cards out. I'm a trainer. Oh, you still need a card. Okay, well, so I kicked it around a little bit. I ended up getting a card. I did the online one.
Yeah.
The online stuff's trash.
I totally agree.
I think
next to worthless.
It's, do you have a 10-hour card? Question number one. Question number two, where'd you get it? Right? Because if it's my site and I'm the GC, you get it online or you don't have a trainer in person, go to an in-person one.
I agree.
Because, granted, I teach the class, so I know the answers to the 10-hour stuff, but you know how I got mine? I was watching Monday Night Football, and I was clicking. Right? I mean, and I might have been born at night, but not last night, and I know that's what the guys are doing.
Right, of course.
So I think that, trainer and content really drive.
Without question. That's a great observation, too, man, and I know that wasn't kind of where we were headed here, but the online thing gets you the card and you can check the block, and that's about it. I know people that have done the online, and I've said, I know that you're doing this because of a time constraint or whatever that might be. We don't have enough people to complete a full class, so we can't. You just have one or two people that need the training. So when they've completed the training, let's get together and we can talk about the material at least.
Right.
That's above and beyond. It's not required. It's certainly not. But I think, just leaving them there with an online class is ridiculous.
Yeah, because it's, if we hit play and it's the robot reading to you or, and those classes are, in my opinion, they're designed to be hazard recognition, right? Can you learn a little bit behind the screen? Sure. But not what you're going to take out of a true class. And then you can bounce ideas off of each other in a class. And
the discussion is really the most important part.
Yeah, that's what I enjoy about going to classes myself, right?
I'll bet you're a good trainer, man.
The discussion. Well, I like to think that.
You seem passionate,
I am, yeah.
And that is the most important part of this. I've been to classes. When I was with OSHA, people would ask, well, can somebody come out and just talk a little bit about OSHA in my 30-hour class? And I would sit in the back waiting for my opportunity to speak, and they would be reading through the CFR.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to mention names, but trainers in this town.
Sure.
Okay, page 364, and they would start reading subparagraphs, and I'm thinking, oh, these poor bastards are going to, pass out. This is ridiculous.
We take tactile people and we put them in a chair. That's hard to keep them awake, number one. Number two, we get the Bueller. Or the Charlie Brown,
right?
We're not keeping anybody awake for that.
No,
and then you start reading your faces in the book, and it's
interesting.
Not fun.
Sounds like you had a good week.
Yeah, it was a good week.
Good, man. And so, I know you got some things that you want to talk about. I've got some questions for you. We can save till the end.
Yeah, that's
what's going on. What's on your mind?
I just came from a place with some of our mutual friends from the government. So I got a couple questions, and you having been...
Oh, you're asking me questions?
Yeah. We're flipping the script here. The inspection process, as it relates, most specific to the nerd side, right? The IH side. I'm a safety guy, just regular, right? I don't know all the nerdy health stuff. So I guess let's walk through, we can stay high level, but what that inspection process looks like, what am I doing, and then typical time frames associated to that.
Yeah.
So I get
What happened? One of your clients had an inspection or something? Was it a health inspection?
Health inspection.
Okay.
Yep. So
IH rolls out.
IH rolls out so it was a complaint.
It was a complaint.
It was a complaint.
Okay. All right. Air contaminant or something
ACM.
like that. Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Those are kind of interesting.
Yeah. So complaint happens, and then what's the process from there?
Okay. Well, if the complaint is valid, which is questionable, a complaint that initiates an on-site inspection with only a few exceptions has to come from a current employee. Mm-hmm. It has to be specific, so you can't just say, oh, that place sucks, you need to get out there. You have to be very specific in the nature of the hazards, as you just mentioned. And then, the compliance officer, knowing what the alleged hazard would be, the IH can prepare, the sampling media, the pumps, or whatever is necessary to do that and come out to the site. You would have to you'd go through the same opening conference. You'd have to go through the same, get permission to conduct the inspection. Mm-hmm. All of those things would be the same. And then conducting the inspection would just be a matter of identifying where the alleged hazard is located, identifying people that could be sampled. They have to do. It is really unusual to issue a citation from an area sample. I don't think I ever did. It's all personal sampling.
Right.
So you'd have to identify some folks that would be representative of the exposure, sample them. And then the performance of the sampling, whether it be asbestos or welding or whatever that might be, if it's an air contaminant, there are very specific procedures that have to be followed per the tech manual.
Is that same day sampling happening, or are we coming back to perform that?
That depends. I think the agency wants it to be same day sampling, but the IHs would like to have an opportunity to see what they're going to be doing and prepare for that, develop some type of a sampling strategy, which is kind of difficult to do on the fly sometimes. So if it was me, I would rather come back.
Sure.
My buddy Phil, still, the head IH over there, we would generally come back if that's possible.
Right.
But there are times where you come prepared to do the sampling based on the nature of the complaint and things like that. And, sometimes if you're concerned that the conditions are going to change dramatically, or you may not, I can remember when we were sampling silica all over the state, and the employers would change what they were doing that would to affect the outcomes.
Sure.
Open doors, middle of December, all the overhead doors are wide open and things like that. There's a little bit of manipulation that can occur. So I guess, that would kind of depend. Travel times, travel distances. You need a full day of sampling. You need to get at least 7 hours of sampling if it's an 8-hour workday, those kind of things. And so maybe travel and stuff might impact that.
Right.
So I guess it's variable. The one thing that I see that was often wrong was just the method of sampling, the way they sampled. As an example, welding fume is supposed to be done inside the helmet,
right,
rather than outside the helmet, because the welding helmet
deflects.
Impacts, the breathing zone and the way that the movement of the fume and things like that. But if you're in a respirator, or if you're in like a blasting hood or something, it's supposed to be outside. And so I saw a lot of hygienists sample incorrectly. Obviously not Phil, because Phil's a really bright cat, but other guys that didn't really get it would do it wrong, and then that the information isn't quite as valid. You have to...
The garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah, and from an enforcement standpoint, it needs to be valid, right? I mean, if I'm just doing sampling to try to gauge exposure levels and maybe come up with some control strategies, okay, it needs to be pretty accurate. But if you're going to be enforcing it, it needs to be done correctly.
That's got to stand up in court, right?
Got to be able to stand up in court. You got to the pre-calibrations, the post-calibrations, just the breathing zone, establishing all that stuff. So did you run it? Do you have some questions about how it was conducted?
Well, a little bit. A little bit for me, but a little bit for everybody else too, right? So opening conference, same day or next day sampling typically is fair to say. While the pumps are hung and we're getting the data, what's the IH normally doing?
supposed to be monitoring the sampling.
Are we doing employee interviews at that point in time?
You could.
Is that post sample collection?
Oh, you could do some interviews during that time. I mean, since it's a limited scope, you probably only allow access to those areas where you have employees that are participating in the sampling. I used to, you're supposed to check regularly on the sampling to make sure the pumps are running, to make sure that they haven't tampered with it, or, I used to put samples on people and pumps, and then I'd come back out and they'd have their sweatshirt on, and now the sampler was covered, and or my pump had stopped, and now all of a sudden, the data I'm going to be getting could be questionable, So you got to stay on top of that. You could probably squeeze in some interviews during that time frame. Wandering around, I wouldn't, certainly allow that. I would try to just kind of,
you're going to try to deviate.
But you got to limit them,
keep them contained.
Keep them on their, on point.
Yeah, just like a herding a cat, right?
Exactly.
Keep them in the box.
Exactly.
Sure.
Some people will even do, on a few occasions, they will do side-by-side monitoring. Mm-hmm. They'll bring in a third party to do the monitoring so you can compare. Because, how do you know if this is valid or not?
Right.
The information that they're writing up a citation now that alleges this is what we found, but in retrospect, a lot of the data wasn't, it might have been a short sampling period, it was an 8-hour workday, but I only got 3 hours of sampling in, or, that's not copacetic necessherily. So you think you're going to get a site?
No.
There's no way they're overexposed, right?
No. It's a funky deal, which is kind of why I'm prefacing with the time frame. And then so we collect samples, then we send the samples off. We get the samples back. You have the data. Do you bring the data in, and then at that point, would you do a closing conference, or at what point would you do that?
Yeah, yes, you would wait until you've gotten your samples back. And they go off to Salt Lake City. The laboratory for OSHA is in Salt Lake City, and they run slow. They're always behind.
The government runs slow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Imagine such a thing. Yeah.
Can you believe it?
We were running up against a 6-month statute at times, waiting for samples to come back if they were really.
So on that 6 month, before I forget, sorry, Doug.
Yeah.
You have 180 days from opening to 180 days. What has to be done by day 180?
Yes. So,
everything?
Yes, everything has to be completed. So the start date depends on if it's an accident or a fatality, the day of the incident triggers the clock.
Okay.
If it's like what you've just described, a complaint, yes, that opening conference day starts the clock. And then you have 180 days to complete the investigation or inspection, whatever it is, do your sampling, get your analysis, evaluate what you've got, and issue citations.
Bring it back to the supervisor.
They've got to be reviewed, get signed, and issued. So you will have had your closing conference within 180 days. If it exceeds 180 days, the statute has been exceeded.
Then we got a problem.
Then there can be a problem with that. Yeah. So I wait on my sample results from Salt Lake City. I get those back. I do my calculations. Those are always questionable. Did you do your calculations correctly? Again, Phil, no problem. Anybody else, I'd question it. I'd want to see the calculations, And which is, I found lots of mistakes in the calculations of some of the guys that worked for me at times, I'm not casting aspersions but it's part of the process.
Or something happens. Sure.
Some people don't know how to do the calculations.
Yeah, they calculate wrong.
They calculate it wrong, and so
averages.
But now if I've got overexposures, then I do my closing conference and say, I'm proposing citations for this, and this, knowing that I got overexposures, and then there is a confidence level that. So I've got this number back, and it has to be within this upper and lower confidence level in order to issue a citation.
So if it's
because
0.010,
there's variability to all sampling, right? So if it doesn't meet that, for example, there's a standard analytical error that accompanies any sampling. There's variability in it, and like with noise, if the sampling came back at well, in order for me to cite somebody for not having a hearing conservation, they had to be at 66% of the dose. 50% dose triggers hearing conservation, but in order to cite you for that, you had to include that analytical error component. So I couldn't cite you for being over the PEL unless you were at 132% dose,
Sure.
rather than 100. So the OSHA guy has to consider that as well. So there's a lot to be considered, and I would always question industrial hygiene work. Even Phil's, even though I know Phil does it right.
Right.
But you need to question it because there's a lot of opportunity for mistakes in there.
Right.
But your guys aren't going to be over to asbestos.
So this
Are we alleging an exposure that happened in the past?
Yeah. So as we know, construction starts, we come in, we take care of business, and we're gone, right? And we close up shop, or this project's done. Now what? Now there's nothing to sample. Okay. So I get my complaint in as a co-show. I have to process it. Supervisor, you're not busy. You go do it.
Right.
I go out there and I say, okay, opening conference happens, and they all look a little bit different just based off the person, right?
Of course. Always.
So opening conference happens, and then if I don't have a site to go to or any samples to take, what would my steps look like then?
If there was nothing to so I'm trying to reconstruct something that happened in the past. And there are ways that OSHA has to do that. I mean, so for example, if I was looking at things that might have some kind of a biological exposure indice, something that could be in my urine or hair or something, it's almost like a drug test.
Sure.
If there was a way to it, like exposure to carbon monoxide, we used to have a calculation for that. If I could get your hemoglobin levels from your blood, I could back calculate that you were likely overexposed or something. You can't really do that for asbestos. Not that I'm aware of.
Right.
So you're trying to determine, what was I might be able to get a bulk sample and say, yeah, it's positive. But even that's questionable because how do I determine that was the material that you were even exposed to? It's kind of wonky.
So then at that
sounds
point,
like bullshit to me, man.
So then at that point, would you, hey, let me just do an employee interview real quick and then be done, right?
I'd probably do an employee interview. I mean, the only thing that guys ever got cited for in the rears like that, if I can say that, in the past might be, and you can't really establish an overexposure. There's no way to do that, truthfully. Then you might be able to cite something like, well, you didn't do the initial sampling. And some of those,
but that was done, and we know that.
The initial sampling was done. Oh, shit, man. There's nothing.
We're wasting our time.
Yeah, waste of time. Total waste of time.
We're almost to month
3.
Month 3.
We're waiting for some feedback.
Opening conference. Hey, what's the scoop? Site's done. We're packed up and gone.
Mm-hmm.
We leave. Now we're requesting employee interviews.
So now this complaint came in after the fact?
No, the complaint came, triggered the inspection.
Okay, but the job was done at that time.
By the time, we divvy it out in 5 days. Mm-hmm. It's done and gone.
By the time the compliance officer rolls on site?
Yeah.
Okay.
To home office, right?
Oh, shit, man.
And then what should I do? Opening conference, so it's closed up. Okay, employee interview, closing conference, same day. See you later, alligator.
Yeah.
Right. Is that how you would do it?
Yeah.
Not.
I mean, so these are non-asbestos guys, obviously, alleging that they were exposed to asbestos, or this complainant is alleging that. But so the only thing might be, I don't know what you could cite potentially. Training or some bullshit like that, maybe, or something.
There's always something to cite, right?
You
Whether
might
it's
be able
going to
to find
stand up in court
like
or not, it's different, right? But I'm scratching my head why it's
taking so long.
Yeah.
Well, it probably got buried in the pile. I got nothing. It's buried in the pile. I get my sampling results back. If you sample, doesn't sound like there's any sampling
were conducted.
So you're not waiting on that. So basically, there's nothing to cite, really. Normally, with my guys, and when it got 30 days old, because I run a report on all of their open cases, And if it's 30 days old and nothing's happening with, I'm like, are you planning on issuing citations here or not? If it's not, close it. If you got some citations,
close the case. Yeah,
close the case. Send them the letter.
Closing conference should happen already, though.
I would think so, man. There's nothing. Yeah, I can't imagine what they're hung up on. Is it Phil? Okay, I was gonna say
no.
Phil might have lost it on his desk, but other than that,
yeah, I couldn't wrap my head around why.
I don't know what it could be.
Why I wouldn't do all the things in the same day.
Yeah,
right?
Just get it done.
If there's no site to go to,
if there's no sampling, get it all done. Didn't come back. He didn't say, I need to come back for some reason.
No.
He or she, I should say, but he, since there's no she's.
There is a she's.
In Omaha? Mm-hmm. We got a she now?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
New gal? Okay. Oh, I guess I have met her. I didn't realize she was an IH maybe or whatever. But anyway, yeah, man, it seems to me like either it's buried in the pile or they're just scraping to come up with something.
Sure.
You know, that's crazy, man. Those I always hated those after the fact allegations. They were so difficult to find any credible evidence, you know?
Yeah, I mean, how do you...
It's really difficult.
I just feel like you're wasting, time.
Well, here's the issue, though. If there is a hazard and it's been sitting on your desk for 3 months, these employees have continued to be exposed to a hazard or something.
We're not protecting anybody.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
And if it's nothing, let's just close it. Get on. Get on to something more important. And there's certainly people out there that are being exposed to hazards that we could be spending our time on.
Yeah, there's employers out there that doing all kinds of Western
you see it all the time, man. There's some real crazy crap going on out there. Yeah. And let's not waste our time on this stuff trying to come up with something.
Yeah, which is a great segue into what I kind of wanted to talk about next.
Okay.
Right? So I had coffee with Anthony. I'm on my way to go do what I was doing next and get hung up at a stoplight in Omaha. That's weird. And thou shall remain nameless. But I saw a gentleman in a bucket truck.
Okay.
Typically, if we're going to do that, we should be in
fall protection. Hopefully fall prevention, certainly.
Yeah. So, which he had a harness on. Not well.
Really?
Awful. And, some of those things, me, I'm not a kosho, right? So sometimes I turn my blinders on. Sometimes I have my eyes open because I'm like, oh, yeah, I need a photo for a class. So it's not photos.
Absolutely.
But, having fall protection, I think is important, right? And recently you talked about do it differently. Well, I'm on board with that.
At least for the paradigm of what we're doing.
Right. Which is easy.
But if you're using fall protection, use it correctly.
Correct. Wear it correctly. And I don't know if that comes back to training or the guys are lazy or all the above. But certainly training can be improved, right? We can do
without question
more frequent, and then getting those harness inspections done that this one didn't look like ever, for a while, what I could see, right?
Right. Did you stop? Were you tempted to stop and say something? Sometimes that's
no
pointless.
I mean, they were, everything was on the ground, right? We were just in it. You could see it, and we're up here on our, like a little kid wearing the chest strap on his backpack, and
he's got his top button.
Yeah, and it's like draping off of the shoulders, kind of. And I'm like, if you got into a fall, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, it's going to mess you up. Yeah.
So, but I stay in my lane. Usually, I don't correct.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Sometimes even when I'm on sites, right? If I'm walking with the GC or the sub, and if sometimes I'll say, if it's like, hey, maybe, I always encourage them to say something to their guys. Once in a while I'll say stuff, but so I think training can be improved, right? I think that the kit that we use can be improved. I just did a talk over at the Alamo Draft House for some guys not too long ago, and it was all around fall protection. And they introduced me. They're like, "Oh yeah, this Ezra, blah blah blah. He's an OSHA lawyer." And I'm like, "Oh, time out. He's just a regular guy, right? He's just a regular guy. Certainly can do billable hours like a lawyer.
Yeah, maybe my price won't shock you so much if you think I'm a lawyer.
Yeah, but no, I was talking. I held up the bucket, right, that you can buy for $100. So I bought the bucket. Man. And I said, who knows what this is? and they're all out in the crowd. A couple guys raise their hand. I'm like, you know what this is? I said, this is trash. Don't buy it. I said, the only good thing in here, I ripped the lid off and I pulled out the anchor. I said, is this. The rest of it's garbage. Don't buy it.
That's good advice.
Brand be danged. I don't care what brand it is, right? The bucket systems they're yuck.
I agree.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Sometimes a harness might be okay, right? If you want light and fast and simplistic, and I use air quotes when I say that because putting those things on are, they get twisted and you're upside down and backwards and you don't know what's what. So sometimes maybe the harness, but the rope grab and all that is goofy. And I said, who knows how long this rope is? How long are those ropes? Standard in the bucket. 50 feet.
Is that right?
Yep,
Okay.
50 feet. And then, like I do with all my stuff at home, owner's manual, trash, right? And I said, I pulled it out and I said, do not throw this away. You guys need this. I said, how much stretch is that? 50-foot rope.
I have no idea.
1 per 5.
Is that right?
Yeah, so 50-foot rope is going to stretch 5 feet.
No shit.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, man. I didn't
That's
know
a
that.
lot.
That is
right?
a lot of stretch.
So that's 5 foot
That's
that
a
you
lot
have
of
to
stretch.
add into your
Fall
calculation.
calculations, yeah.
Right?
Nobody's doing that.
No. Those guys are running that thing all the way out to the end and they're walking around on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They tie a knot in the end or something and then run.
Yeah, they just pull the hand grab all the way out to the end so they can walk around and do whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
And then including fall all the way to the ground.
Yeah. There is a roofing contractor local here that has a commercial on television, shows a bunch of their guys working and coming down off the roof and stuff, and I'm seeing harnesses and ropes and things all being used, in my opinion, incorrectly, and I just laugh. I mean, maybe good for them for trying to even show fall protection in one of their commercials, but when I worked for OSHA, my former boss, Bonita Winningham, used to have me call companies that had advertising.
For media referral?
Yeah. Well, and they weren't even, we wouldn't, there is that 6-month statute, so we have no idea when and where that commercial was filmed or whatever. So enforcement was really difficult, but she would still insist that I call them and point out to them that their commercial showed a bunch of unsafe and non-compliant activities. And they'd like, who the hell is this?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just a guy, just like
Just
Ezra.
doing my job.
I'm just a guy that was told to call you and let you know that your commercial sucks,
Yeah.
And they would just usually hang up on me or something. But
Well, perception's reality, right?
yeah, man.
Who's to say that, okay, I
That's
see
probably the way they do it.
XYZ company's commercial, yeah, it looks theatrical and super cool and whatever. And then, okay, well, noted. Go find them.
Right.
And you see it in real life.
You
and it's a
mentioned that
problem.
media referral. That is really an interesting comment because on Monday mornings when we would come into the office, usually on the weekend there'd be some local piece about some project or something, and there'd always be a picture in there that was full of violations. But Bonita used to cut those out and hand them out to the guys and say, go do this, go do this, go do this. So I used to tell all my friends and now clients, don't do pictures. Don't have your company logo on your shirt standing on the top plate of your step ladder and smiling, because they're coming out.
Or if you are going to do those things, at least loop in the safety guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no kidding.
I mean,
right.
Because even if, and I don't condone this, I want you to fix it on the front end, but with, you can do some wild things on the back end, right? So, putting extra straps on respirators that, what I mean, that weren't on in the first place, you can fix that in post.
Right. Oh, you probably fix a lot of that stuff now.
Yeah, which I don't condone or recommend we do that. But if we're trying to maintain that perception being reality, like, hey, let's make sure we're doing the right thing, number one. But if we're not, bringing somebody in to at least screen those.
Yeah.
So we don't look.
Like, the movie people that are, portraying Navy SEALs usually bring a Navy SEAL in to comment on the, what we should do, man? We need to be consultants to the Home and Garden TV network. with all of those remodeling and
Yes.
home improvement shows.
Yeah.
Because every one of those is full of violations.
We might have to cut that out because that's our retirement plan.
Is that an
Doug.
idea? Yeah, okay, yeah. We've already patented that, so hands off.
Yeah, forget about it.
But it used to be like watching Dirty Jobs, and I love Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe is one of my heroes, man. But they were always doing some questionable shit on those.
Do they get the cinematic exemption?
Oh, there's probably been
'Cause
some
it's for
higher level
entertainment?
negotiation.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a little, quid pro quo or something
Sure.
going on somewhere. But
Hey, I
they
need
shouldn't.
my shed remodeled real quick.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, the assistant secretary never has any doors that don't close or
No.
whatever, But it's interesting, man. So, yeah, the fall protection,
And
is really...
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, man, I mean, I think to Mark Damon's point, it is so complicated. You really can't leave this to your employees to be they're not competent persons
No.
typically, right?
The easy part of fall protection is commercial construction. That's
Much
easy.
easier, yeah.
Right?
much
Because
easier.
it's usually the same time and time again, right? Before we get into residential problems, I wanted to make a comment for this particular entity that hosted this training. They came up to me and they're like, thank you for saying that, right? Because my thing for the 6-foot shock absorbers, I said, you know what this is? Trash. And I have all the versions of it. I said, this is trash. This is trash. This is trash. Not because I took it off of the construction site and it doesn't pass inspection. It's trash. It's because it is. Don't buy it. The best place for that thing is on the retail shelf because you never bought it. And some of the problem is what the box stores are stocking. Right? Because if you go to, you pick your poison, brick and mortar, most of them do not stock adequate amounts or the right kind of SRLs, PFLs, the self-retractors, the incorrect types, the classification, if you want to get into the 1 or the 2 or the A or the B, whatever we want to do with the changes now, but they always have the wrong ones, right? I get the 100-foot self-retracting lifeline. Okay. How are we supposed to work with that normally? Right? Directly overhead, right?
Sure.
We get our 30 off a center or 30 and 30 for a total of 60 or whatever that looks like, whatever mom says. But how are guys using it? HLL.
Yeah.
Right? They're walking perpendicular with it. They're not working underneath of it.
That's true.
So it's not leading edge rated and problem, right?
Right.
So, we're stocking the wrong stuff or we're not educating people. Like, why is this lanyard $300 and this lanyard is $30? Well, if I got 50 guys to outfit, $30 looks a lot more appealing than $300 a pop.
No doubt.
So I think,
That
is stocking in box stores are some of the problem.
Yes.
Training and educating people, certainly we can do
part
better.
of the problem. But no, I think you're right. I think, this cost issue is always going to be a problem, particularly when we're talking about the residential small contractor groups that maybe don't have the resources. I mean, you go to Kiewit, they can probably afford decent fall protection, but some of these companies don't and won't, and they can't build the price. It can't build it into the price. I've got a good friend who is he owns a kind of commercial industrial subcontracting. I don't want to get into too great a detail, but we were having a conversation the other day about the fact that they work for general contractors that refuse their bids because they have put all this, the safety, maybe we've quoted guardrails into this, or maybe we've quoted other things into this, and they come back and say that's too high, and all of a sudden, so now in order to compete in the marketplace, you've got to swallow your integrity and not do it or refuse to do it, but you got to put food on the table. You're trying to, the position that they're put in sometimes is just untenable, man.
That's across the board, right? For fall protection, and then the guys who get into the ground, right? And the playing field's not even, right? Because everything costs money, I get it, right? But we're not looking apples to apples bids, right? Because if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right with the fall protection and all the stuff. And if we don't own it, we have to buy it or rent it. And so we got to build that in. Somebody's paying for that, right?
Somebody has to pay for it.
But when we do that, until we've been accustomed to that, there's going to tick work speed down a little bit, right? But more so in the ground, those guys who are digging, right? Because I got to put a box in there, I got to move a box, I got to assemble a box, I got to do all this stuff. That takes time.
Oh yeah, man.
And tens of thousands of dollars. And when, when we got a bid for a company that is just digging and kicking in the pipe, or we got a bid for the guys who are digging, putting the box in, putting the fall protection up, doing all the stuff, time changes and dollars change.
That could be significant.
Days,
significantly
and
different.
hundreds of thousands, depending on the size of the project. So until everybody's on the same page.
That's a real tough one, man.
I know.
The fall protection stuff is tough, but man, the excavation stuff is really tough. I mean, when you're looking at that residential plumber or somebody that has to come out here and tie your house into the main or whatever, and they dig a 12-foot deep hole and they're down in there looking for
just as wide as a bucket.
Yeah, as wide as a bucket and nothing. And I see that out, I mean, we live in a neighborhood that was developed over the last 5 years, and I would see that all through the neighborhood, and I would just look on in horror, but what's the solution for those guys? I mean, can that 3-man plumbing outfit afford some kind of sophisticated shoring or something? Or, I mean, if somebody that was smart could come up with a solution for that would be affordable and usable,
right?
That would be a godsend, because dragging, boxes around with a excavator or putting in shoring.
If somebody wants to throw Doug and I some bones for all of our great ideas, maybe we turn it into like a Netflix, right? We pick your rental company. Hey, based off the size of your outfit, you pay us, X retainer fee and then a monthly installment of blah, 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 and we'll hook you up with what you need, right? So then it's kind of a flat fixed cost, and they can, I don't know.
Maybe deal with that cost a little better.
But yeah, until everybody's on the same page. There was an outfit, and somebody will fact check it, hopefully, but it was in Colorado, and I want to say Fort Collins area, that somebody got killed in a trench. And the city, or the county, I forget which, they said if you are caught in a trench without protections on any of our projects, for sure, and I don't know if you're banned from bidding work for the municipality.
Nice. Wow. Good for them.
Right. So then now we just evened the playing field.
Right.
Right. So
That's
until
it,
we get there,
right,
and then we tie that back to residential fall protection, same deal, right? Guys are out, and
that's a big deal. I mean, when the owners are stipulating that this must be done. I have another client that is in a situation, a very difficult situation, because the work that has to be done has a hazard exposure that's difficult to control, not very timely to control, but the owner of the project is saying, I don't give a shit, just get it done. This is what we contracted, this is what we agreed to. And so maybe something was, I'm not suggesting something was missed, but maybe this was missed in the bidding portion, or maybe when they were laying out the work and planning it, maybe it was missed, but it's there now, and they've identified it, and they're trying to address it, and they're not getting a lot of sympathy from the owner, and that is really frustrating.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do.
Yeah, what do you do?
I mean,
retract it, say,
leave
midway through.
I feel so bad for them. They absolutely want to do the work, but they've identified this problem. They want to do it safely and correctly.
Yeah.
And I feel for them, because they're in a difficult position.
Yeah, what do you do?
It sucks, man.
Yeah, it's painful. I've talked to some roofers, residential guys, like, oh yeah, because if I put an anchor in, what do I have to do? Most of the 9.5 out of 10 times, what do I have to do?
Well, you got to pull it out and fill those holes up.
I got to make roof penetrations, right?
Man.
So until we get, homeowners like, oh, I don't want that, right? Well, it's going to leak. It's going to be, that. And then I'm like, okay, our next option is do leave-in anchors, right? When we construct it. No, that looks ugly, right? So that some people don't do that. Well, it kind of brings me back to fences. I'm not a fence guy, right? But we've all seen the wood fences, right? And then they have the horizontal bars at the slats get anchored to, right? Those are supposed to be facing the home, not the street.
The slats and stuff.
Well, so if I got my fence,
You got the vertical.
and I got the horizontal outward, that's wrong.
Oh yeah, facing out.
It's
Yes.
supposed to be facing in, so
Right.
the fence is pretty for
The
everybody.
pretty side is for us,
Yeah.
not for the owner.
Right. So I think that fencing, and I wish they would do this. You want it done that way? Okay, that's great. Another 20% more to do it incorrectly, right? So it's the same thing for fall protection. Hey, you don't want me to have, blah, blah, blah. The bids, now it's more. Which it should be, because if I got to pull in a portable fall protection,
Yeah.
right?
I can remember, gosh, it's been many years ago when I was the compliance assistance guy. I would go out to the home builders and talk to them about, why can't we leave the anchors in? Maybe install the anchors on the ground, in the peak or whatever. So we're flying this stuff into place, leave them there. So then when they're sheathing and, roofing the house, the anchors are there. We can leave them there. Then anybody that comes out to, install your antenna or whatever has something to, if they would, tie off to. And they were always, oh, no, I'm not taking that liability. No way. Somebody's going to hook off to it or tie off to it and fall, and then I'm going to get sued. And I just thought, this is cowardice, man.
Everybody's too happy.
It was always a liability. I'm not taking any liability. And I've never been sued. Hopefully I'm never sued. I've never experienced that. I'm sure it's awful, but it's not going to change unless it gets in that build design phase, right?
Yeah, we gotta build these things in. Yeah, certainly we can bolt them on and a la carte the stuff, but that's part of the problem, right?
Yeah,
is a dongle for this and an adapter for that and a widget for this and build it in.
It needs to go into the design.
And I get that sometimes dollars come into play, but
oh my gosh, man,
buying a $60 dongle for my iPad is goofy.
Yeah.
So I can plug it into an HDMI, a la carte. Like, people aren't going to buy it, and you look at the presses and the shears and the light bars and the curtains and the pressure sensing, all the safety features that we want, a la carte. It's not on that. It's not that base price. But I don't have to. Hey, I also want seatbelts in my car. I don't have to do that. It comes that way.
Yeah.
Why can't the things come that way?
The automakers kind of get it. I mean, the automakers actually realize that their drivers aren't going to get any better. In fact, they're probably going to get worse. And so we've got to build the cars, and I think Todd Conklin told me this, but we're not building these cars not to have accidents. We're building them to survive accidents, because those dumbasses are going to have accidents.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about that. My proposal was that at least 50% of the driving Americans need to have their licenses revoked and not be allowed to drive, because
I'm a big proponent of that.
We give them away
training, every after, you guys were kind of talking about it on the last podcast. I think after a certain point we got to, or no, it was a different podcast. Sorry, Doug. But after a certain age, then, it's a frequency kicks in, right? After age, 45, it's every 5 or 10. And then whatever that looks like, I don't know. But I'm a big advocate for training and retraining. And,
this is I was going to ask you about your pet peeves. Do you have any other safety pet peeves? I'll tell you mine. Well, somebody calls me and says, how often do I have to do this training? And you look at the OSHA regulation, and if you're willing to go through the regulations, most of them give you a training frequency. Not all of them, and they're not all the same. It's very inconsistent. But, okay, this one you have to train initially, and then maybe if there's some red flag that goes up, or this one's annual or whatever. And I'm like, I think the frequency should be based on the hazard and the relevance to your workplace. Like, you guys do a lot of confined space entry. Train every quarter.
Yeah.
That's a high risk activity,
Absolutely.
Train every quarter. Well, does it say I have to? No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It says train once. It doesn't even say train annually in the confined space standard, I don't think.
Bare bones.
Bare bones. What are we doing here?
Yeah. My answer to that, when I get asked that question, how often do I need to do this? Normally I just leave it annually. Period.
Well, it makes more sense to people.
Do it initially and do it annually, right? New hire and then annually.
Yeah.
And then, you know, at the minimum, right?
Yeah.
You know, you look at first aid CPR, 2 years. Because
Yeah.
people forget.
Yeah,
Or
no
it's
doubt.
not, you know, part of their everyday, right? As an instructor, my question was, how often do I have to have my card? Well, if I train classes, that's sufficient, and I don't ever have to re-up my card as a trainer.
Since you're going through the material
Right.
regularly. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Which is why I shouldn't have to have a 10-hour card if I'm a trainer,
No doubt,
right?
man. Right.
But when I do that, and you know, most specifically in my Stop to Bleed classes that I put on, I say, you're gonna do this. I don't leave it up as an option for you to do hands-on, like it's part of the curriculum. Everybody's gonna do it, right?
Tourniquets and stuff.
We're gonna tourniquet, wound pack, occlusive dressing, you know, all this stuff.
You're doing that?
Yep.
Good for you, man. That is a really important piece of information. Everybody should have that.
Oh, yeah.
class.
It's great.
Everybody. Good for you.
You know, and I say, you're going to do it here, right? I don't leave it up to, you know, because you get the shy folks.
Go
and then
home
you
and
get the people
practice.
who talk to, oh, yeah, this and that. And then you get that
that
stuff
guy.
in their hands and they're the worst with it.
Right.
But I make people do it because this is the last time you're going to do it unless you do it for real.
Until you actually need it. Right.
Yeah.
That's a great
And
point.
if you don't build that, at least that one rep muscle memory, you're going to have no idea. Zero less of an idea than, you know, because you forget. You get nervous. You know, everybody fight, flee, freeze, and, you know, everybody handles situations a little bit differently. But if you've never done it before, you know, it's not going to be favorable.
It's not going to be good. Yeah.
So
I totally
drilling
agree.
that.
Anything that is done under stress or duress is going to go to shit unless you've practiced it and have it really thoroughly, you know.
That's why, I shouldn't say it too loud, but you used to be able to haze people when I was in the Marine Corps. You can't do that anymore, right? And
But there's a purpose behind
if
it
it's
to
done,
some degree.
if it's done correctly, right? There was purpose behind it,
Right.
Because you can only replicate so much to, you know, wild things happening, right?
Right.
So doing it and drilling it is one way to do it, right? Confined space rescue. We hope that it never happens. But if you've only ever sat through one class or watched one video, maybe, are you going to remember
And then
what to do?
something's going to shit in that space, and now we've got to get that guy out
Yeah.
of it. Well, I've watched this with my clients come apart.
Even in a controlled training setting, right? You know, if you poke the bear a little bit and everybody kind of gets a little bit, you know, juiced up, feed them some coffee and
Get them really
get them
hyped
a
up.
little
And,
bit juiced. And
Yeah.
then, you know, we start, you know, if we don't focus and slow everything down and people start yelling and getting frustrated and they forget what they're doing.
I totally agree. I mean, it's even like the emergency action plans, you know, the tornado shelter, the evacuation. You know, you remember what those were like, man. Okay, we're going to do a fire evacuation drill at 2, and the alarm goes off, and everybody's, you know, finishing their coffee, grabbing their stuff, walking to the, you know, talking to their friends. Got to stop and use the bathroom first.
Right.
And I just watch those and think, if this ever happens for real, we don't have a chance. Because you know, they don't put any effort or consideration into the drills. You know, like you were saying, like in the Corps, like the drills need to simulate reality to the degree that we are capable of doing that.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, my buddy Jim Steele down at Airlight Plastics does a thing, or at least used to, where they would set up scenarios out in the plant. They'd have a guy like down on the ground. They would simulate maybe like an accident had occurred or something. There'd be an index card on his.
This is what's wrong.
Yeah, I've had a heart attack, or I was hit by a forklift or whatever. And then, you know, they would wait until the first passerby would see that and hopefully initiate the response to see what happened. And usually it would just be total cluster, you know.
Tripped and fell.
What are you doing down there, Tommy?
Wake up, man.
You know, just I mean, I think we're going to get what we deserve sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Do you have any other pet peeves?
I think for
Things
me,
that really drive you crazy. It doesn't have to even be safety, man.
there's a couple things, you know, safety related, like not wearing Fall Pro correctly, having the wrong stuff. It's just like
The laziness
There's
of
no
that.
excuse anymore, right? But there's probably no safety glasses. To me, that's a non-negotiable, right? Like it's easy to put them on and wear them.
Easy. And they're so comfortable and useful now.
You know, if you buy the $3 ones or you buy a $300 set or anywhere's in between, right? Like that's non-negotiable. We shouldn't be doing much of anything without them on.
Agreed.
And then the phrase common sense. It's common sense.
Right.
It's not common if you've never done it, right? Like if I said, Doug, I need you to get this 240 up on this tripod and, you know, put a burst on X target, right? And you have no idea. Doug, it's common sense.
Yeah,
like everybody knows how
Everybody
to do
knows
that.
how to do that. Yeah.
They don't.
That's the kiss of death, man.
Right? We got to, you know, we have to train our people, you know, and parents to kids, right? You can't get mad at your kid if it drives a car for 15,000 miles without an oil change if you never told them, hey, you need to do this, or hey, this is how this is done. You can't get mad at them for that. They don't know. Right? How are they supposed to know?
That's a great example.
It's not common sense to them.
Right.
So I don't like the phrase common sense.
That's really annoying, man. I totally get it. And when the old guys are like, well, you should know that, or that is common sense. Everybody's coming into these jobs, particularly now, with different backgrounds and experiences. You know, bringing guys off the farm that have had a lot of mechanical experience and have worked hard, that's almost a thing of the past. You know, now kids are coming to you, they're coming into your industrial or construction work site from, you know, Arby's.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's that. And then there's, you know, more and more people are following what the laws say, right? So wage and hour DOL says thou can't do, right? You can't operate a forklift until you're 18. You can't run a saw until you're 18, right? You can't do hazardous work until you're old enough. I remember doing that stuff as a little duffer on the farm, right? And then I worked for some family members, and I did all that stuff prior to that. So the transition into the workforce at the younger age was easier, right? For folks back then, where now, if we're doing it correctly, you know, I yield the question all the time, what can my summer help kids do and blah, blah, blah. You know, well, if we're doing it correctly and we're not letting them do that, they're coming into the workforce with less practical hands-on experience. So common sense is not so common, right?
Yeah, that's correct, man.
So that kind of bugs me.
That's a frustrating cop-out. One of my pet peeves is the I've never been a safety cop personally. That's not my mentality. My temperament doesn't work well with just shouting at guys for, you know. And the more you listen to the Safety 2 people and that kind of thing, the more you listen to Todd Conklin and those guys, the more you realize that's just in vain to be approaching it that way. But I used to struggle with the safety know-it-all, you know, the guy that knows better. And I've been doing this long enough to know that I don't know very much. You know, I certainly don't know a lot about human behavior and how we manage those kind of things. You can learn a lot about the regulations. Most of my OSHA friends know a lot about the regulations, but they've never implemented a safety program. They don't know what goes into doing that, you know, and so they're oblivious to the challenges of taking what it says in that regulation and applying it out in the field, making it happen. You know, that is really, I really have a lot of respect for people that actually apply that well out in the field. It is really a skill, you know.
Yeah, the more you know, the more, at least for me, this is how I look at it. The more I know about safety, the more I realize I don't know about safety.
It's so vast.
Right? You can't know everything, you know, and I've been to, I couldn't even tell you how many trainings, right? Classes and webinars and all this stuff. And then, you know, you forget stuff, and then you retake a different version or another class, and you're like, oh yeah, and I remember that, right? So you're always relearning, which I think is important.
To your point about the 10-hour, repeating the 10-hour, man.
I think it's important to relearn that stuff, you know, because you forget. Right?
Where do you go for, what kind of resources do you use? Do you like to read? Do you go into the books and read about safety?
If it doesn't have pictures, I'm out.
Pictures?
I'm just kidding.
Classes, podcasts. Where do you go to? I mean, you're obviously a curious guy. You want to learn more.
Yeah.
Where do you get that information?
I subscribe to newsletters.
Excellent.
Now, do I read? I would say 9 out of 10 of them just get unread, so that bubble goes away, and then they go to the trash. But I subscribe to those, and I'll kind of go through those when I have time. And then there's a few entities out there that are always pushing webinars. So I'll sit in on those if I have time. I like in-person classes.
I do too.
So I'll try to go to those. There's a few bucket list items that I got that I'm looking to do to learn more. I'll do some podcasts. A lot of the safety podcasts out there. I'm not saying that because I'm here on this one, but this is my favorite one that talks safety. Just most of the other ones it's all based around like ads and this product and, or I don't learn anything.
Yeah.
They're recapping, whatever, or they're trying to sell a product or, and then for me, some of podcasts are like, if the person doesn't get me, like if I don't enjoy the way that they're talking about something, I'm out on it. Right.
Yeah.
So,
if it's not in that, whatever your comfort zone is for conversation or something.
yeah. Or if, I hate to say it because my voice probably annoys a lot of people too, but like if their voice isn't like, then I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I lost half my viewers.
Yeah, I got that going for you. They checked out already.
Yeah.
But I'll listen to like coaching and leadership podcasts. I was fortunate enough to go to a conference not too long ago, and I listened to this guy's name's Jake Thompson. He came out and he's like a motivational speaker. He talked. So I listened to his podcast. They're really short clips.
Nice.
5 to 15 to half an hour. So you can do it. The 5-minute one you could listen to if you're in your ice bath, right? Which I do the plunge
do
too.
You?
Yeah.
Awesome,
so
bro. Awesome.
I'm not as extensive. I don't have the regulator. So it varies.
It's damn cold.
Yeah. The colder the better, I think.
Right?
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
guys were talking about that last week.
Yeah.
But
So you just throw ice into a bathtub or something, or how do you do
I
it?
bought a it's called a portable deal. It's just over $100.
Okay.
It's not insulated, right? So as we transition to warmer weather, I'm just going to have to eat more ice.
I gotcha.
But you can buy molds off Amazon.
You keep it out in your garage? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I was going to be cute and put it on the deck, and then it was cold, and I didn't want to do it, and I was scared.
I'm with you, man.
And then the whole thing just froze solid.
Yep.
And I spent like 3 hours chipping ice out of this thing.
Yeah. And how many gallons is it? Do you know?
Oh, it's a lot. It's like 40 by 40 by 40. It's big.
Holy shit.
You could fit 2 people in there. Like
No
I can sit
kidding.
in there however I want.
Good for you.
Crisscross or
Good
spread
for you,
eagle,
man.
whatever.
I'm impressed. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's
Good for you.
the colder the better. I found
Yes.
that for me at least in there I feel like I get the most benefit when it's colder.
And you don't really need the same duration if it's extremely cold like that, at least from what I listen to and read.
Yeah, which I don't do, right? I'm not.
But a few minutes?
Yeah.
You go
So
in for a few
my
minutes,
goal
or?
is 3.5.
That's about right in the wheelhouse.
I listen to people that have done the research for me that I trust, and then I just if these guys are doing, that's good enough for me, and then I'm in.
That's what I do. Well, Andrew Huberman told me that you need about 11 minutes a week.
That's kind of I'm on this Facebook deal, and that's kind of what everybody's like posting. Like this is what you need.
Yeah, that's
to
awesome.
to reap the benefits. But my goal is 3.5 a day.
Good for you, man.
Yeah,
That's
when
awesome.
I'm home.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let me ask you something else. So you travel a lot. I travel a lot. What do you do when you drive? You listen to music? Do you like it quiet? Do you just think? I mean, what do you pray? What do you do when you're driving?
I do a little bit of everything, right? A little bit of music. I only have one Spotify account. Well, my wife does. So like she always, if she gets on it, like it boots me off. So then I can't listen to like Joe Rogan.
Right. Right.
So I listen to him when I go on long drives because his podcasts are really long.
Yeah,
right?
I like Joe.
But I'm always current on yours.
Thank you.
There's a couple other people that I've kind of been bouncing around with, like business and money and leadership. So I'll kind of bounce back and forth on that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
What the flavor is there. A little bit of music. Sometimes it's quiet. Mm-hmm. I got to turn the music down so I can think or see better.
Right. I do too. Yeah. I get too much stimulation and I start feeling a little distracted. So there are times where I'll just shut it off completely and just drive in silence. And then just I can be with my own thoughts and, a little bit more contemplative. But I have to admit, yesterday I went down to do help with this training. And one of my topics was cranes, construction cranes. And I am by no means an expert. So I actually pulled up a podcast, kind of a podcast, more of just like a YouTube video on cranes and listened to that for about 20 minutes, and it just kind of refreshed.
Yeah.
I want
to talk
some
about
of the stuff I'd never learned before, but some of it I had kind of forgotten about.
Yeah.
So that was nice. I do that on occasion. If there's a subject that I need to be refreshed on, I'll do that.
Right.
But I typically don't listen to safety stuff when I drive. I typically listen to more like the motivational stuff or leadership stuff, or I'm trying to learn more about like electrical safety. So I want to know more about electricity and power generation and things like that. So you can subject matter things that come up, and I'm like, oh, that's applicable. I can kind of weave that into my approach or whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
There's just so much. Someone sent me recently a really interesting link to a history podcast, which is really fascinating. A lot of World War I, World War II stuff.
There's
some brilliant stuff.
He appeared on Jocko's podcast a couple times, but there's a guy, his name's John Stryker-Meyer. He's got a podcast. So he was a SOG guy back in Vietnam and in all of the countries that the
original SOG guys.
In. Yeah. So he started his own podcast with all of those guys, and they tell all of their, because they're past their 20-year NDA
so
stuff.
They can talk.
Yeah, and the stories
would you send that link to
wild.
Me?
Yeah, I can.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah, it's super neat.
What a generation of guys, man.
Oh, that conflict, for whatever reason, fascinated me the most. Mm-hmm. And then the Iraqi conflict. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was like the fighting style or just
which you participated in.
Not OIF. I was in OEF, Operation Enduring Freedom. So I was in Afghanistan, not Iraq.
Okay.
I was a little bit too young. Well, I wasn't too young, but I mean, to get to push like in 03, 04, I missed that boat by a few years. Mm-hmm.
Was that Operation Iraqi Freedom or?
Yeah,
or Desert Storm?
The initial was Desert Storm, right? Okay. That's like your 90s era folk. But like 2003, 4, that's Operation Iraqi
I was working for the DOD during Desert Shield, which preceded Desert Storm. It was kind of the ramp up.
Sure.
And, I mean, I'm not suggesting I had anything to do with the conflict other than I was with the DOD at that time. And it was interesting to see the wheels turning within the DOD, the preparation and stuff, just at what level I could see it, which was, looking through the window. I wasn't in, really interesting. I know this is totally off subject, but going back to the Vietnam conflict, the war, the time, I worked for a gentleman when I was with DOD who was about 2 or 3 levels above me, and he was a really good leader, and we were civilians, really good leader of civilians. He had been in the military, and he had been a POW in Vietnam for like 5 years.
That's crazy.
And this guy, nothing fazed this guy, as you would imagine.
Sure.
He was cool, calm, and collected during anything and everything that world could throw, this world could throw at him, because he'd been through something that was so intense and different that the little petty shit that we all get all bunged up about, he didn't even think about it, man.
Yeah.
He'd just stand there by his door and just kind of take it in, watch, coordinate. Real interesting guy. I liked him very much.
That's neat.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
I don't know the detail of his story.
Sure.
I'm sure it was. I would love to listen to that podcast.
Yeah, I'll get the link sent over to you.
Very cool.
I say I want to, but I don't take any action on it. But it's on the bucket list to buy a couple of these, get a recorder, and go around to and just bounce around to the DAVs and the VFWs and try to capture these guys' stories before they're all gone.
That would be fantastic.
I know. I'm a day late and $1 short to get a lot of the WWII guys, but and the Vietnam guys are kind of trickling out too. But I want to try to go in there and hey, sit down for an hour, 3 hours or whatever, and just capture these guys' stories, because I think that if they're willing to share, right? But,
But I mean, having your background, having served, having been overseas, they would more likely open up to you than anyone else. And a younger guy who's actually curious about it.
Yeah, I think that's
a great endeavor, man. I think that stuff needs to be archived.
Yeah.
It needs to be captured somehow.
Because otherwise history goes away.
It does.
Right? And those
and then we're forced to repeat
fascinating stories, right? So for their grandkids or great grandkids, for that to be digital, I think would be kind of cool.
Good for you.
So it's on the bucket list. I haven't done it
So
yet.
those of you that are interested in that, you can send money in here, and we'll get it to
I've got
Ezra.
a Venmo for sure.
We'll get it to Ezra so he can get that project started, because that's an important project. My buddy, Steve Jordan, was an OSHA compliance officer, served in Vietnam, Marine Corps. So he's one of your guys, and he was like a scout sniper or something. I don't know the details, but he wasn't the guy that laid up in the perch. He would accompany these little squads that would go out into the bush, you know. Had some injuries, sustained some injuries from combat, then ended up at OSHA for a while, and really interesting guy.
That's
Stevie.
cool.
Yeah, great guy. I could hook you up with him because he's in town here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
He had some interesting stories and what little he shared. I can remember my relatives, my great-grandfather, or my grandfather, my great-uncle, my dad's uncle, were all World War II guys. And when I was a child, which is a long time ago, I would hear their stories. And you just sit there in awe, you know? Because these guys were young men when they were barely men when they were doing this stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
I was on the plane.
Incredible.
I downloaded a couple of videos to watch on my Netflix. I downloaded Hacksaw Ridge, which I've seen that a couple of times.
Classic.
That's great. And then I downloaded Fury.
Oh, yeah, the tank one.
Yeah. The flights weren't long enough to get through it, but just like thinking back on the lack of technology that they had, the lack of technical apparel that they had, footwear, like all of the controversy and the adverse everything that those guys had to, you know. And obviously, it's Hollywood, so a lot of the fight scenes and that stuff is kind of ramped up. But, Saving Private Ryan, like you just look at that and you think about like how wild that is. Mm-hmm. And then like the lack of today's technology that they had.
It's amazing.
Getting around in a foreign country without a digital map. I can't even hardly get around Omaha without my
I know,
maps
man,
up.
without the GPS anymore. Man, how are we doing for time? What time
I don't know what time we started.
Oh, we're running over. We're a little bit long. Okay, man, I got one last question for
sir.
you, and maybe you can, I know this might not lend itself to a concise answer, but if you weren't doing this safety thing, what would you be doing? Do you have a hobby, or you have another passion that might be something that you would be involved in?
Oh, that's great. I really enjoy the training aspect of what I do, so I do like that. But if I wasn't doing this, I got 3 little people, right? Almost 8 months, almost 3, and 4, right? So my hobbies are my kids right now, just because, there's only so much time.
Of course.
But I think the last time we talked, I kind of talked about shooting a bow and that kind of stuff.
So you're going to actually show me how to do that at some point.
we can do that.
Maybe this spring or summer we can go over to Chris's place and do that.
Then go eat some shrimp.
Go over to the cornbread shed and get a shrimp po' boy or something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be great.
But outdoor activities, right? If I didn't
guide or something.
I don't know if I'm probably not good enough for that, but that would be fun, right? To spend my time in the outdoors. There's a YouTube that my oldest and my wife and I watch. It's called Outdoor Boys, and it's kind of evolved a little bit over time. But it's this guy, and he's always going camping, and usually he takes one of his 3 boys with him.
Nice.
So it's pretty neat. So
that'd be great if you could do that with your children or something.
Yeah. I tried to buy into the retirement plan on Monday. I scanned all 3 tickets, and they said, "Sorry, you got to go back to work."
Oh, believe me, I know. We're talking that same talk, and I think we'll just keep working for a little while.
Yeah, I don't know what the odds of winning something like that is, but
yeah,
I had three chances in there to pull my ticket, and I didn't. So I'm back to work.
Back to work, at least for another week, man.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure, man. We've gone way over the hour just because it's just so easy to have the conversation.
That's good.
The information is fantastic, and I hope everything works out all right with that OSHA
it'll be
thing
fine.
going on. It doesn't strike me as a problem, but it is frustrating sometimes. The agency can be frustrating, and gosh, I have good friends in the agency. I have a lot of respect for the agency and the mission, but just the way that the process works can be somewhat frustrating.
Yeah, I think, when it's, I'm going to keep everything close to my chest and, under my book only, and for, need to know basis, and you don't need to know, it's not as transparent as I think that it should be.
Yeah.
You did the podcast with Mike Rubin. Yeah.
Really sharp guy.
There's guys like him that are putting the content out there for people to be like, okay, right. So the education is out there. We just got to find it. And I think we just need to figure out how can we be more transparent.
Yeah.
Right. I get they got a job to do, and, I love the mission, right. Keeping people safe. It's more of a, it depends. Right? Like OSHA technical term, it depends.
Yeah.
So if it was more, I tell people the only thing black and white in safety is the paper and text.
That's about it.
Right. So if it were more black and white and a little bit more transparent, I think the process would be a little bit easier for everybody involved.
I would agree. That's a great comment. Good way to end. Ezra, thanks,
Doug,
man.
it was great.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
It's good to see you, brother.
Hey, likewise.
Have a good weekend with those youngins. That sounds like fun.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
It's starting to get nice out, so we
I
can get
think
outside.
we're going to have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Some really interesting comments today. So I hope it spawned something in you, something to think about. If you ever have questions or comments, please let us know. Other than that, have a great weekend, and I will see you next Friday. Later.